In the heart of the city, the clock ticks mercilessly towards midnight. Each second brings the killer closer to escaping, and the investigators closer to their deadline. This is the story of an hour, a fleeting 60 minutes that will determine life or death. With only an hour to catch a killer, every moment counts. As the city sleeps, the investigators race against time, knowing that any delay could lead to another tragedy. The stakes have never been higher. It was supposed to be a quiet night, but that all changed with a single call. In a shadowed alley, the body of a young woman was discovered, her life brutally cut short. The clock had started ticking. The evidence was sparse, the clues elusive. But one thing was certain, the killer was still out there, and time was slipping away. Her name was Emily, just 25 years old, with her whole life ahead of her. But in one horrifying moment, her story came to a tragic end. Who would want her dead, and why? As detectives entered her apartment, they searched for answers. But the more they uncovered about Emily's life, the more questions they had. The killer's motive was as mysterious as the crime itself. The city was gripped by fear. News of the murder spread quickly, leaving its residents anxious and on edge. But the killer was still at large, and the clock was still ticking. The pressure was mounting on the investigators. The public demanded answers, and the media was relentless. But behind the scenes, the detectives knew they were racing against a deadly clock. The detectives chased every lead, no matter how small. They mapped out Emily's last movements, trying to piece together the puzzle. But the closer they got, the more the killer seemed to slip through their fingers. Interrogations were intense, but the truth was elusive. Every suspect had an alibi, every lead seemed to hit a dead end. Time was running out, and the killer was still out there. And then, a breakthrough, a late-night call, an anonymous tip. The voice on the other end provided information that could change everything. But was it reliable, or just another dead end? The clock showed 11:30 p.m., 30 minutes left. The tip had given them a new direction, but it would take every second they had to follow it to the end. They raced through the city, adrenaline pumping. The location they were headed to was known for its danger, but they had no choice. They were out of time, and this might be their only chance. As they approached the building, the tension was unbearable. Every creak, every shadow could be the killer. The final moments of the hour were slipping away, and they had to act fast. There he was, the suspect, cornered and desperate. The detectives knew one wrong move could mean disaster. It was a standoff that could end in violence or justice. With just 10 minutes left, every breath was heavy with anticipation. The suspect was unpredictable, the situation volatile. But they couldn't afford to let him slip away. With just minutes to spare, they made the arrest. The killer's reign of terror was over. But the cost had been high, lives lost, and a city scarred. The hour was up, but the impact of that night would last a lifetime. For the detectives, it was a victory, but one that came with a heavy price. Morning broke over the city, a new day dawning with the promise of justice. The case was closed, but the memories of that hour would never fade. Emily would never be forgotten. Her memory would live on in the hearts of those who loved her, and in the dedication of those who fought to bring her killer to justice. The detectives would move on to the next case, but the memory of this one would linger. Each case leaves its mark, a reminder of the fragile line between life and death. In the end, justice had been served, but at a great cost. For the detectives, This was the reality of their work, a relentless battle against time and evil. The city began to heal, but the scars of that night would remain. It was a reminder of the darkness that could strike at any moment and the bravery of those who stood against it. Life moved on, as it always does. But beneath the surface, the city was forever changed, its innocence shattered by a single hour of terror. The case went to trial, the evidence meticulously presented. The detectives had done their job, and now it was up to the justice system to ensure the killer paid for his crimes. The verdict was unanimous: guilty. The sentence was severe, a fitting end for a man who had brought so much pain. Justice had been served, but the loss was still deeply felt. For Emily's family, the pain would never fully fade. They found some comfort in the fact that the killer was behind bars, but the void left by her absence was impossible to fill. They held on to her memory, the small tokens of her life that they had left. The family would never be the same, but they vowed to keep her spirit alive. For the lead detective, this case was more than just another file in a cabinet. It was personal. The faces of the victims stayed with him, a constant reminder of why he did this job. In the midst of all the darkness, he found light in the simple joys of life. It was a bittersweet victory, but it reminded him of what was worth fighting for. The community came together in the wake of the tragedy. They vowed to protect each other, to be more vigilant, and to ensure that such a horror would never happen again. They couldn't bring Emily back, but they could honor her memory by making their streets safer. The tragedy had galvanized them, turning pain into action. The job never stopped. There was always another case, another victim in need of justice. For the detective, the work continued, driven by a deep sense of duty. The faces changed, the stories varied, but the mission remained the same. Each case was a race against time, each victory a step toward a safer world. The city was forever changed by that hour, a fleeting moment that revealed both the worst and the best of humanity. In the wake of tragedy, they found strength in each other. Life went on, but with a new awareness of the fragility of peace. The city had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, its people united by a shared determination to protect what mattered most. Each year, the city gathered to remember, to honor those who had been lost, and to renew their commitment to justice. The legacy of that hour would live on in their hearts and actions. For the detective, this was more than just a case, it was a reminder of why he chose this path. The fight for justice was never easy, but it was always worth it. An hour, a fleeting moment, but one that can change everything. In the battle against evil, time is both an enemy and an ally. Every second counts, every decision matters.